This is Jason Jennaro from Breakwater Energy Partners. I'm the Chief Executive Officer.
Breakwater, talk to me a little bit about what you do and how you're related in the oil company before we get into the big news, sir.
Sure, absolutely. We'd be happy to do it. So, Breakwater, we're probably the largest private water transfer and recycling company. We're focused on Texas and New Mexico, so the Eagle Ford and the Permian Basin. So we do a lot in the water movement space, but we also do a lot in recycling. And we've done that since 2012, and we've been fortunate enough to kind of grow and recycle for a lot of customers on both sides of the basin and really refine that and think about things a little differently, which led us to this most recent announcement.
And that's why we're here today, responding to the press release put out about your recent, would it be called a new recycling facility, a new water recycling facility? What is the official terminology? And let's get into some of the meat and potatoes, some of the nuts and bolts about this amazing innovation that's coming into the Permian Basin.
Sure. It's a produced water recycling facility. It recycles produced water from the oil and gas space, really from the Permian Basin. And we really built it because we were recycling a lot for our customers, on a kind of a small scale and individual level, which is pretty common now across the industry. But we weren't able to really help them aggregate a lot of water. And so when you kind of take a step back, the Permian Basin is obviously a very important basin for the oil and gas industry. It's now the largest basin in the world. It's larger than the ones that you find now in Saudi Arabia. But the thing that folks don't talk about as much is how much of a water producer it is. And for every barrel of oil that's produced in the Permian Basin, it produces 2 to 3 barrels of water. So when you think about it, the logistic exercise in the Permian Basin is less of an oil logistic exercise and more of a water logistic exercise. And so when these wells are completed, they actually consume more than a barrel of water effectively for every barrel they produce. And then they produce 2 to 3. The problem that you have is how to really marry the supply and demand. Because the reality is a lot of operators, are producers, at certain moments, and then consumers of water at other moments. And so it was really difficult for them individually to meet their own water requirements with their own produced water. And they could do it partially, but they oftentimes couldn't do it completely on a project by project level. And so as we saw this, we took a step back and said, what really needs to be done is we need to build a really big commercial produced water recycle facility that aggregates water from a number of different operators all concurrently, all at the same time, and basically acts as an air traffic controller, moving water, from the folks who don't need it, who are just going to waste it and put it down a saltwater disposal, recycle it, store it, change its form into something that is productive, and then move it, including the last mile, to the folks that actually need it. So really serve as that nexus point, to serve as that kind of honest broker or good steward to basically take that water and move it to the folks that actually need it, away from the folks that are looking to dispose of it in kind of a good stewardship sort of way.
That's interesting. So it's first of all, it's stationary. It's not it's not a mobile type of a thing or temporary. This is something that is intended to have people come to you. And like you said, air traffic controller. I was envisioning trucks coming in, like an artery system, and dumping their water into a big pool. That's what I was visioning. So how close am I to that being the reality of what it is?
It actually, we don't handle trucks, although we can. There are certainly a lot of trucks that move a lot of water across the basin. But what we do, a lot of these operators have their own produced water systems that really serve themselves, and they operate independently, but they don't tend to interact as much with their neighbors. So you might have 2 separate operators who have their own, their own acreage next to each other, 2 or 3 or 4, but they all might statistically balance their own water, meaning they move water throughout their system, which means that they can't use much of their water at many moments in time. But if you look at all of their schedules together, there's that opportunity. And so that's why we invested the effort in actually building this permanent facility, building the storage capability, building the treatment capability, so that we can kind of form that nexus point where water comes in, so that we can move the water away from the folks who were looking to dispose of it to the folks that actually needed it to complete their operations.
What size are we talking?
So this one's the biggest in the Permian Basin. It is 250,000 barrels per day. So that's our capacity, and it lets us recycle a lot of water. Even in third quarter, which was not a stellar time for the Permian Basin, we recycled 5 million barrels in the third quarter alone.
How about geography-wise? How much space is this going to take up?
So we've built it, pretty large. So it's an 80-acre site.
Nice.
So it's sizable. We have obviously recycling operations there. We have buffer storage, and then we've built commercial treated water pits as well. And those pits are there to store our recycled water, so that we can aggregate it for customers who need it, and then move it at scale to those customers who are completing their wells when they need it, so that they can actually get enough recycled water to complete these wells with 100%, up to 100% recycled water, which is not common at all. I mean, it's not common to be able to access that much water when you need it, because the reality is, the way things are done right now in the Permian Basin is the consumption of water when it's needed is very, very substantial. So, for example, right now we're working with a customer who's doing, a completion that's requiring 100,000 barrels per day over a period of time, and that's just a lot of water. It's very difficult to accumulate and aggregate that much recycled water instantaneously, especially without storage. And that's part of what we do is we form that nexus point so that we can aggregate a lot of water from a number of different operators. We can store it, we can prepare for that. So that lets us be able to be of service and help customers save money by using a lot of recycled water.
I have a dumb question, but what do you do with the recycled water when it's done?
Well, we store it. So the recycled water is stored in recycled water pits, and we wait for folks to have a completion. And when they have a completion, we work with them to store enough water for them, and combined with their ability to kind of refresh the pits, and then we help them move last miles to actually become consumers of the water. So we have productive use for it. We're basically using this industrial water, which would just be disposed of. We're upgrading it. We're recycling it to a much higher spec that will allow us to store it, and then we move it to those customers who require it, so that they can use up to 100% recycled water for the completion of their wells.
I would think that this would help satisfy a lot of companies' missions and drives to be more environmentally conscious and green, if you will. Does this technology and innovation, I guess, is it considered green or environmentally friendly?
It absolutely is. There's a big movement now in really across all industries, but especially in the oil and gas industry, revolving around environmental and social governance. And so this kind of ESG, this green movement, to really, it's really investors saying, hey, profits are great, that's important, but we also need to be the best stewards of our resources and the best stewards really of our companies, and the people who we're kind of blessed enough to work with, that we can be. And so a lot of, especially public companies, are reporting how they perform on these ESG metrics, and things like methane emissions, things like water recycling very important metrics towards that. The environment is an important metric, and and so there are those things that are reported, and those matter as it relates to institutional investors making investments in companies like oil and gas companies. And so that's part of it. And so that's part of what we help folks do, is really kind of create more on ramps and off ramps to water, so that we can create more opportunities to recycle water, and most importantly, distribute that recycled water for beneficial use. And that last mile, like so many different industries, is so important. If you don't have that ability to distribute that last mile, you can't recycle very much, because your pits will become full. And if there's nowhere for the water to go, it has to go downhole. You must dispose of it, because these wells produce so much water. So being able to create these mechanisms, these on ramps and off ramps, to aggregate a lot of water and distribute a lot of water, creates a lot of opportunity for companies to recycle a lot of water. And then it's candidly, it's something that they want to do anyway, because A, it's more cost effective, but B, it's the right thing to do from an ESG perspective.
It's rather interesting, because a lot of times these interviews will go out on our radio platform, and so people listening, they might not be so deep dived in on a lot of the day-to-day operations in oil and gas. So hearing about recycled water, and the fact that the technology exists, and the fact that this ESG environmental movement's going on, somebody driving to soccer practice might look at their mom and dad and say, well, how's this not regulated, or how's this not a law, type of a thing. So hearing the technology, and knowing what the company's drives are, and just the whole culture of way things are, what's your biggest obstacle? Is it cost? Is it education? Is it regulation? Because something like this, like I said, to the average person would seem like it would be law to use recycled water or recycle water. So what are you finding out there that are your biggest barriers to entry, I guess, is kind of the question. Does that make sense? I don't need to know your business model, but, help some people out by helping us understand a little bit.
I think part of it, is a great question. I think part of it, is awareness. And, honestly, part of it is being able to create opportunities for companies to do it. Because, when operators are operating, of course, they want to, they're kind of managing their own network, if you will, their own assets, their own land and mineral rights, and that sort of thing. It's hard for them to think, more holistically about, all of those who surround them as well. And that's part of what was challenging in the past. And the reality is, a lot of times operators are operating in areas where there may not be a lot of other operators. And so there is a more limited system, limited ways to kind of get things done and be efficient. Because the reality is, a lot of operators, when you look at them in a vacuum, are consumers of water at certain moments and producers at other moments, and oftentimes not both at the same time, unless you have a really, really big footprint. But if you look at it holistically amongst a number of folks in a number of areas where there are concentrations of operators who are all, drilling and completing wells at the same time, when you look at that statistical water balancing, there is opportunity to be collaborative. There is opportunity to share. And that's why we call this collaborative recycling. And so part of it is really having kind of, folks that are willing to make the investment and be trusted stewards of it. Like, they're able to recycle water to a high standard. They're able to store it, build these facilities the right way. They're able to be reliable. They're able to help folks distribute that water, last mile, because there is that process to get it to the last mile, to get it to the ultimate completion job. Those are things. And, and the data is very significant too. We got 10 million data points that are generated already on this one location, because we're constantly managing water flows. And there's a lot that's involved in it. So part of it, really from our standpoint is kind of, regionally, educating and encouraging, our partners, our customers, to trust us and work with us as stewards and find areas where these make sense. And that's a big part of what we're doing.
About 6 years ago, somebody I trust very much in the oil and gas and economic world told me that about 70% of the America's shale play is going to be out of the Permian over the next 30 years. And that's how big it is and vast it is and how much activity there is down there. And I always paid attention to that a little bit. So when I hear you talk about, the Permian, the prolific Permian, which I hear a lot of people use that alliteration term. You didn't, but I hear a lot of people say that. It reinforces those studies and those anecdotal stories I've heard from people I trust that the Permian is going to be a kind of a core for shale play USA over the next 20, 30 years. You've got some geographical neighbors with the Eagle Ford and maybe even the Scoop Stack, if you want to call that, and Haynesville. Are you looking at, and you're based out of Houston, if my notes are correct. So are you looking at any other shale plays, or are you, is the geographic location close enough so maybe you can reach down into an Eagle Ford or something like that? Talk to me a little bit about, what your future aspiration plans are, because, 80 acres and, a big facility like that, obviously you guys have some dreams going, which is good.
I mean, it's great question. We definitely operate in the Eagle Ford. We operate in other, in other basins. But part of this it was around kind of proving the concept and proving the prototype, if you will. And it's easier to prove. It was easier for us and probably more logical to prove the concept where you have more operators, more well completions that happen all at the same time, because there's just more opportunity to access, a lot of produced water. The Permian Basin produces a lot of water per barrel than, compared to really all other basins. And then secondly, it consumes a lot of water too, because there's just a lot of activity. Like you said, there's, it's more than 50% of all rigs, in the United States are in the Permian Basin. So there's just a great concentration of activity, which is why it makes sense, to look to the Permian to build this pilot site, this prototype, and really prove the concept, because it really hinges on collaboration. It hinges on what we call statistical water balancing, recognizing that everyone's water schedule is going to be different. And when you combine them together, those distributions, those timing distributions, start to normalize a little bit and creates opportunities to be the beneficial distributor of water. And even more, it allows operators to aggregate enough recycled water to do the majority of their completions in certain areas, in these areas that we operate in, with recycled water. Whereas if they didn't have access to everyone else's water at each instantaneous moment in time, they'd be limited, in the amount of water they can recycle. They'd be limited just to their own water. So in order to prove the concept, it made sense for us to focus where there was a lot of activity, where there was significant statistical imbalances, and these sites basically serve to help create to mitigate or flatten those curves, if you will, and really serve as kind of the good shepherd or good steward to help get recycled water to the most beneficial place at the right time.
Did you mention where it is located, by the way? I didn't write that in my notes. Where's this unit going to be located, this facility?
Yeah, we've already built it. It's been operational for, I guess 6 months or so. And it's located in between Howard and Martin County in the Permian Basin, in what's known as the Midland Basin side of the Permian Basin.
Okay, yeah. That's a Big Spring area?
Yes, sir. It's called the Big Spring Recycling System.
Oh, okay.
And it is located really due west of Big Spring, if you will,
What?
right on the Martin County border, and it really serves those two counties.
Tell you the one thing that shocked me was the town of, I think it's called Butler, where cell phone service doesn't work if you're a Verizon customer. Found that one out the hard way. That's interesting when you're using Verizon service for GPS. you gotta make a turn, and you realize, oh boy, old school maps would come in handy right now. So
for sure, you're relegated to pulling into the gas station and asking for directions. You don't do that as much today.
And they ask, oh, you got Verizon, and like that's what they all say because they know exactly what's going on. I found it comical. I figured it was some kind of Hatfield McCoy story that. There's a reason for it. That's usually how things work when you get just little idiosyncrasies like that. Well, so it's been in operation for 6 months. What do you? How's it going then? As far as taking a step back, things that surprised you, maybe things that you gotta do a little differently. Just kind of the state of the union, if you will, state of the recycled water.
Sure. It's going. It's going well. In the third quarter alone, we've recycled around 5 million barrels, which is quite a bit. We have 3 operators who are working with us all at the same time to start out with at the facility, and it's going quite well. I mean, we've been able to, we've been very pleased with how we've been able to perform, if you will, through the third quarter, which is, still during the pandemic, still a tough time, for the Permian Basin overall. And we've been pleased to be able to recycle a lot of water and serve a lot of customers, and they seem very happy with it. And we're grateful for the opportunity and look forward to doing it more.
Kind of wrapping up here, taking a look at Jason Jennaro, Breakwater Energy. And actually, I think there's another word after Breakwater Energy, isn't there? Breakwater Energy Partners. So I apologize. Look at me getting all casual here as I get the interview down. My tie's already off, just so you know. So I'm really, it's 5 o'clock somewhere here at 10 o'clock in the morning, I guess. But anyway, that's a bad joke. Okay, I did want to ask you, as we kind of enter into 2021, things have changed, from the COVID side. Last year before COVID happened, actually 2019, you had companies like Whiting and Chesapeake. They were already laying off people. And so the energy industry was getting hit with the ESG movement and the 16-year-old climate activist and that whole deal before COVID. So this was a new issue, problem, that sort of thing that was very real. And to me, the thing that we really ramped up over the last 5 years, specifically in the last year and a half, and it's actually a big part of our marketing kit this year, is hope, inclusion, awareness, and service. And we're really focusing on the inclusion part because everybody uses energy every day. So everybody needs to be aware of things that are going on with the different forms of energy and how it's being utilized and how it really, there is such a net positive when it comes to that. So, but my question to you is, do you think, words like hope and inclusion and service and awareness, do you think that they will have value in 2021?
I really do. I think, I think if we're fortunate enough to be leaders really in any industry, or any part of government or any part of even your community, it's really an opportunity to be a good steward of those resources, whatever position or resources that you have. It's important to be a good steward. And I think to be a good steward, it's really about making people's lives better around you. It's being a good steward of those resources, be it money or time or position. And I think there's an opportunity to think broadly and have those conversations. And some of what we're doing, we're trying to work with our customers, to try to encourage them to think broader and create opportunities for them, to think more broadly than just what they do in a specific area. And then also, try to do things that are unique and provides everybody around us to be part of something that we believe in. That's cost effective. We got to do that, but it's also something that's kind of the right side of history. And I think if we're blessed enough to be a leader in any facet of life, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is this going to make a difference over time, and what are little things that we can do today that's going to make a difference in people's lives, in the environment, and could be something that's bigger than ourselves, because ultimately everybody wants to work on those great projects that are bigger than themselves, that ultimately have positive influence on folks around us and our community. And that's part of what we do, and be it in a small way or sometimes bigger ways. And I think the industry is the same way.
I think that and I just want to validate and just kind of extend with what you're talking about a little bit. I kind of interpret it as there's a little bit of an intangible value shift that's happening here. And what I mean by that is I've got, for so long, the media has lived in the intangible value marketplace where, we were selling advertising and exposure. And as Rupert Murdoch used to say, we sell eyeballs. That's what we give you is eyeballs. And, there's a lot of truth behind that. And that's really just an intangible thing. And it's like, oh, my eyeballs make more money than these eyeballs and that sort of thing. Or ears if you're in the radio business or whatever it might be. So I remember when we hired a former auto sales guy, and he did service. And after the first day, he came and he said, he goes, when I sold tires, you could feel and touch a tire. He goes, selling advertising, that's really hard to sell because it's intangible. And that was kind of the first time I understood the difference between the two. And there was another time where we hired an engineer, terrible sales guy, but he came back and showed us a matrix chart, which if you go more than 250 miles, rent a car. And then so he showed us the wear and tear of vehicles and oil changes and costs and all this other stuff to where, anyway, he was very good with the linear thinking, but the abstract thinking, not so much. So I think where I'm going with this is that I think there's a shift in the intangible perception when it comes to value, because the ESG movement is real. And that is an intangible quality that is being put on banks and investors in terms of whether they're going to give you money or not. So, the industrial forest, which we're putting our efforts towards in 2021, is a big part of that push. Seeing what you're doing with recycled water, I'm looking at that as that shift of the intangible value, where I think the awareness and the education is going to make what service you have a lot more valuable than somebody who's not offering that intangible value. I hope that made sense. It was a really long way to explain what I was talking about, but I think that the tires versus advertising and marketing helped a little bit. Were you following me at all, or did you hang up?
No, I was, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it's interesting because when I was in business school and finishing business school in the early 2000s, one of the things that business school taught you was the only thing that mattered was profit. They paid lip service, I feel like, to other stuff, but they put a tremendous amount of emphasis on profit and efficiency, which leads to higher profits. And the reason why is they would say, hey, if you do more than what the minimum standards of law or human resources or whatnot, if you do too much more and it costs you more, your competitor might not, and will have a lower cost of doing business, and they will beat you. I think things have changed, and I think the ESG movement is a very, very important movement, whereby board of directors are telling chief executive officers and the large institutional investors like pension funds and universities and state governments are telling CEOs that they need to think about more than just profit. And don't get me wrong, we must make a profit. If we don't, we can't we can't pay the bills, we can't keep the lights on, we can't, create jobs. Profit is very important, but it's not the only thing. I mean, and it it matters to work on something that is bigger than just profit, and sometimes that's just on a project level in terms of how we treat people and how we work with people internally. Part of that's creating opportunities for folks, to work on stuff that's bigger than themselves, and some of that is working on projects that are bigger than ourselves as well, and sometimes that's taking risk that that something will come together, and like for example this recycle site, this first in kind recycle site that is bigger than ourselves, and can create opportunities for folks to recycle a lot of water, save money, which is great, but also creates opportunity to do something that would be impossible in the absence of a company taking the risk to do it. And I think part of that is being driven by the ESG movement, which is basically saying, look, CEOs, I want you to make money. You must make money in order to do well, but you also need to take into consideration other ways to be good stewards to your environment, other ways to give folks opportunities, and doing the right thing. And if you do those things, I'm going to give you more credit than guys who don't do that. And that's part of, I think, the direction that we're going. I think that's part of what institutional investors are asking for, and I think that's going to continue. And I think it's a good thing.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about what you have going on and with the is it produced recycled water that you've got? Well, it's kind of what we're talking about, but you do other stuff too. So what services do you offer, and how can people get in touch with you to utilize those services?
For sure, yeah. I mean, we're easy to get a hold of. BreakwaterEnergy.com. You can get a hold of anybody on our team, and there's our services there on the website. We offer a lot, really total integrated solutions across the entire water supply chain. And we work with our customers to help them, do what they need to do as far as completions, especially in the Permian Basin, and that's what we work on. But we try to do things, as you can tell, a little differently, and create more opportunities for our folks and for our customers along the way, and that's a big part of it.